We're simulating World War in Minecraft. In the largest and longest running civilization experiment in Minecraft, we're taking 10,000 players and scattering them across the 1 to 2,000 scale model of Earth. In the previous episode, we covered the beginning of society in Minecraft, but since then, things have changed significantly, and now the entire balance of power is threatened. Right now, war is being waged between the two largest superpowers on the server, and nobody is safe from the carnage. But in order to understand how this global conflict came about on our scale model of Earth, we first need to examine the development of our 4,000 player anthill so far. In the beginning, society was still in its infant stages. Players farmed for enough food to survive, and few were able to form large towns or support any kind of military. You could consider this a Stone Age of sorts. Since then, the server has grown tremendously, with larger towns scattered across the map. Population is essential to the growth of any civilization, supplying the labor and cooperation to produce food, construct buildings and monuments, and even supply a military with essential armor and weapons. Most importantly is the use of these villager trade systems and experience farms. These allow for nations to produce high-level weapons, tools, and armor, which are all essential in building a strong military. In fact, for some nations that are able to produce so many goods so easily, their only option is to put the surplus of items on the public market, making items like enchantment books and armor more affordable to smaller nations. As a result, money begins flowing freely and individuals can gain massive amounts of wealth. This is easy to see when looking at how the shopping district has changed since the last video. Ultimately, this forward progress has allowed the experiment to become something much more beautiful and interesting. You can see it just by looking at some of these new societies that have shown up out of nowhere. Unfortunately, this rapid development would soon become its downfall. First, we'll visit the lovely town of Italy. This town is probably one of the more well-rounded ones, having both pleasant architecture and a well-functioning villager and XP system. Tokyo, Japan is currently the most populated town, yet it still lacks a lot of infrastructure and has no villagers or XP farms. By the look of it, it has a lot of people, but only a few individuals have any sort of wealth. While not rich nor super advanced, the town of Sri Lanka has the most impressive wall I've seen on the server so far. They've intentionally turned an entire island into a fortified city, making it a lot harder to attack. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this holds up against a siege. This base doesn't look like much on the surface, but it's actually a huge underground complex with spawners, storage, 3 rows of villagers, and everything. Probably one of the nicer, more formidable bases I've seen. This is my favorite town by far. There's just so many well-made assorted buildings that it feels like a lively city. The attention to detail on each of these buildings is impressive, and we also see the use of villager trade system, though there's no XP farm. This brings us back into how our beautiful new world got plunged back into conflict. This is a new era where more towns than ever can afford to charge into battle, whether to settle grievances or just for personal gain. If a town can't defend itself from these nations, its only choice is to befriend someone who can. Because of these complex alliances that have formed over the past few weeks, a single conflict is able to bring the entire world to war. This all started with Shadow's long history of beefing with other world superpowers. Originally formed by refugees from communist Aesir and Mongolia, they decided to instigate a conflict against your mom. After the previous video was released, which covered the beginning of the war, a spy deep within your mom revealed top secret information to Shadow and dug secret tunnels in an effort to sabotage the integrity of their nation. Before long, Shadow launched an invasion, penetrating deep into your mom using the tunnels and ultimately winning the war. Sadly, most of the players of your mom went inactive after this defeat, but a player by the name of LC continued on and founded the town of Alabuena. This town will become very important later in the war. The nation of Shadow continued to attack smaller towns until a larger coalition was formed called the Boys Alliance. This alliance consisted of players from the towns of Falkland Rep, Nuke, Mongolia, and a couple other small towns. Shadow later attacked Alabuena, causing them to join the alliance as well. At some point, a rogue player from Rosefort attacked 2 players in Italy, forcing them to call for help from our mysterious vigilante Quatza, and 2 members from Alabuena, including LC himself, essentially forcing Italy to align themselves with the boys and Rosefort with Shadow. Now, the town of Alabuena is the single largest and most powerful town on the server. Coming in at a close second is, you guessed it, Shadow. Obviously, the smart thing for Shadow to do is attack the boys. In no way could this possibly spark a world war between 2 global superpowers and their allies. Of course it did. All it took to ignite a global conflict was a simple duel between players Krosmaka and Sua. Sua, a member of of Shadow was bored and wanted to get an easy kill, but was forced to flee after Krosmaka put up a good fight. Here's the thing, Krosmaka just so happens to be an important figure in the boys' alliance. Making matters worse, Shadow then attempted to assassinate Orchestrated Epic, basically guaranteeing a global conflict. Before long, the first major battle occurred between the two global superpowers. This battle occurred between Shadow and the Allies after Shadow began terrorizing smaller nations. A player by the name of Orchestrated Epic was under attack by 3 of Shadow's members and remained severely outnumbered until reinforcements arrived. Eventually, the boys managed to kill one of Shadow's members, Mode, forcing Shadow to retreat and winning the battle. Later, in a planned duel gone wrong, we see a 4v3 between Shadow and the boys. Originally a 1v1, Shadow decided to step in when their gladiator began losing the fight, getting the boys involved as well, turning it into an all-out conflict. One of the boys is killed in the fight, making it a victory for Shadow. Up until now, the wars consisted of small skirmishes, but thanks to a new update that allows towns to attack and siege other towns for land and money, a huge battle and a surprising betrayal is coming between our world superpowers and their allies. The final battle was the largest on the server by far, as the last 3 to 4 remaining members of Shadow defended their ally Rosefort against over a dozen well-equipped members of the boys' alliance. The members of Shadow put up a good fight, surviving surprisingly well despite being hugely outnumbered. Unfortunately, they got split up and the boys were easily able to defeat them with numbers. There was no real way for Shadow to succeed, especially since a large portion of their player base had been banned for duping or had quit entirely because of it. Somewhat disheartened, the members of the boys' alliance held a meeting in the allied state of Italy to discuss the end of the war when disaster struck. The Italians had executed a plan days in the making, with several members of the boys' alliance defecting in order to participate in the betrayal. The first part was already complete. After a long drawn-out battle with Shadow, the boys were somewhat weakened and low on potions. The next part was to lure everyone into a small square area of sand, and hosting the conference was the perfect opportunity to do so. Lastly, all Krosmaka had to do was break a single sign, which would drop a good portion of the boys' alliance into a gigantic pit of death, complete with spikes at the bottom. All but 2 were instantly killed by the trap. A subsequent attack occurred in Italy, with several very bitter members of the boys' alliance returning to the area in an attempt to retaliate. All of the boys were eventually forced to retreat, and the new fascist Italy enjoyed some momentary peace. However, a few Italians decided to attack Mainland, a town in North America. Because of a huge numbers disadvantage and extremely poor tactical decisions that allowed the new anti-Italy coalition to pick off the Italians one by one, Italy suffered a crushing defeat with a total of 6 deaths. Later that night, over a dozen AIC players attacked Italy. Despite having only 3 online members, Italy managed to kill 6 AIC players, profiting several sets of netherite and diamond tools and armor with minimal losses. They had learned from their previous mistakes and adopted guerrilla tactics to coordinate their attacks, using stealth to ambush and quickly kill individuals cut off from the rest of the group. Given the circumstances, Italy managed the situation very well, earning them a win and putting them back ahead of the AIC. What was supposed to be the end of a massive rivalry between global superpowers has developed into a whole new conflict out of nowhere. I honestly can't tell where this is going to go from here, but what I can tell you is that you should stick around for the next video, where we'll be continuing to cover the conflict between AIC and Italy.